Hello, 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 hello. My name is Terry, and welcome to the Animation Industry Podcast. Today I'm chatting with someone who has already been on this podcast before for a completely different topic, and that is Kat Alioshin. Last time she was on the chat, she was joined by Spike Decker as they shared their newly released documentary, Animation Outlaws, which covered the journey of the infamous Spike and Mike Animation Festival. But this time, Kat is joining me to chat about her career as a super amazing producer who's focused on stop motion projects. She's worked on stuff like Coraline, The Nightmare Before Christmas, Monkey Bone, and many more. In fact, her career spans all the way to the 80s, where she got her start handing out flyers to the Spike and Mike Animation Festivals, while also working as a DJ at a lesbian bar where she would take tips to play requests. And just another fun fact about Kat, she is the youngest of 7 and had to be super scrappy to get anything done as a kid, which is probably where she gets her spirit from. Now, one more thing I want to mention before we dive into the chat is that Kat is currently working on developing an independent feature film entirely in stop motion right now called The Inventor. She's collaborating with some really big names like Jim Capobianco, who wrote Ratatouille, and Don Han, who produced The Lion King. And today she launched a Kickstarter to fund the animatic for the film, which is 98% funded already, and it's only been one day of the launch. On the Kickstarter page, Kat has included some really cool behind-the-scenes designs and test animation, and she's got animators who worked on Isle of Dogs and Fantastic Mr. Fox working on it, so you know it's going to be good. I've included links to check out the film in the description of this chat, so please check them out and maybe consider contributing to the film as well. Now, just one more thing. This episode is sponsored by my friends over at Bloop Animation, which is an animation learning platform packed with premium online video courses for aspiring animation filmmakers. They have courses for all major animation programs like Maya, Animate CC, Toon Boom, Blender, TVPaint, and many others, as well as some non-software courses like a storyboarding course, animation foundations course, and even one about making a graphic novel, which covers absolutely everything you need to know from start to finish. Their courses are all in video form, so there are no deadlines or application process. You simply just pick a course and start learning in seconds. They even offer a free ebook titled Making an Animated Short, which covers their entire process, step by step, of how they made one of their films, from coming up with the idea to storyboarding, animating, and all the way to exporting the film. And you can get that book for free at bloopanimation.com/animationindustry. And you can check out their complete course library at bloopanimation.com/courses. And I've included all of those links as well in the description of this chat, so please check them out as well. Now let's jump right into the chat. Hi, Kat. How's it going over there?
Hi, Terry. California's doing all right, I guess, in these crazy times.
Yeah, crazy times. It's very warm up here in Toronto, so I'm very happy. I love the sun. I don't know if you can see, but I have a little red on my nose here. And this
you gotta be careful.
This is actually our second chat because we chatted about Animation Outlaws, and I'm also wearing the amazing t-shirt that you sent me here. Thank you so much.
Thank you for wearing it and representing. I love it. That Everett Peck design, it really stands out. Animation Outlaws, the documentary.
Yeah, so if you're listening and you're not familiar, Kat and I did a previous episode about a documentary about the Spike and Mike Animation Festival that she produced. And I saw the documentary. It's quite fantastic. It's really well done. So you should go check that out and check out our episode that we filmed together too. I'll include those links in the description. So Kat, now we're going to chat about you mainly. How does that feel?
I've had a long career of animation. I'm very proud of it. And unfortunately, it means that I'm old, but it's really turned into a long career since basically animation, predominantly stop motion, since 1991.
Yeah. So, well, you've been kind of in the stop motion scene since it became a thing in feature films, right? So,
yeah.
I wanted to ask you, I guess, why did you get involved in stop motion? Why has that been your thing throughout the years, all the way through?
So I will say, and Spike will love this, Spike and Mike had a big part in that, because I went to UC San Diego and was studying film. I was in live action. I thought I was going to be a director, though I was kind of leaning towards the more arty side of production, maybe property master. I mean, that's kind of what my level was going to be. And along came Spike and Mike, and they pulled me into their crazy circus, and I started seeing all this animation, and not just clay animation, but I was seeing painted glass, and I was seeing paper mache and just all these different kinds of ways of expression, and all short too. Their whole program is short animation. So really nice, quick, fabulous stories just pulled me in. And from then on, I was like, well, I can actually, this is something I can really sink my teeth into. And I played a bit with titles only, like in my last year of college. I started doing down shooter style, just really, really simple titles. But I didn't ever feel like I was going to be an animator. I just knew that I wanted to be part of animation.
That's really cool. So why, like, how did you actually get involved in the animation aspect of it, going from, shooting titles and handing out flyers to becoming an animator and then obviously an amazing producer?
Yeah, thank you. Well, tons of time spent sweating and working long hours on live action in the Bay Area. I worked on Pacific Heights, Dying Young. I worked on MC Hammer videos. And one of those videos, it was Bobby McFerrin's video. And the gal that I was working with, her name's Jill Rosica. She had been asked to work on this long-term project. And at the time, it was like you kind of wanted to work on short-term, fast-moving commercials and maybe a feature that was only 3 months. And she's like, I don't know if you're going to want to work on this, but I know you like animation. Dun, dun. It was a nightmare. And I was like, what? Of course I want to work on it. So she pulled me in as her assistant, a production coordinator. And it was simple as that. Somebody knowing that I worked with Spike and Mike, worked in animation, and said, you like it, let's go. So that's what I did.
So I mean, we talked about how you started animation in 1991, but you graduated before that. How is kind of the industry, like, what were you feeling at the time? Like, how did you actually get into everything versus like, how do people get into things these days?
Well, I think you mentioned, or you're going to mention maybe networks, but it is really just about who you know and who you're working with. I was working with Jill, and she knew I liked animation. And if I wasn't working with her, I don't know how I would have gotten into Skellington is the name of the production company we started from scratch in a big warehouse in South of Market, San Francisco. But just really knowing, always in the back of my head, knowing animation was going to be part of my future, just not knowing how to pinpoint it. But yeah, that came along. It was just a huge bonus for me.
So you knew animation was going to be part of your future, but you weren't like, here's a very specific plan of how I'm going to get in there. Like, I'm going to apply here and work my way up. It was more just kind of going with the flow, and it turned out that way.
It was. And I think part of, for me, it was being part of the prop. I don't know if you know much about live action movies, but prop masters and people that deal with all the props, there's quite a bit of art involved, or if a film needs a particular prop and it has to be custom made, you have to either create it or get someone to make it for you. So there's a bit of art involved. So I knew that kind of edge of like, oh, well, I need to get somebody to help me make a particular graphic, maybe a dinosaur or something. So there was a little bit of the creativity in prop masters work, but yeah, it wasn't, you're right. I know you're trying to sort of say, I did not have a set plan. And I wasn't trained in animation. Well, there wasn't really, UC San Diego didn't have an animation department per se. It was film based. I mean, really, if you look now, it's science based and math. We kind of snuck in there in the film group, small bunch of crazy punk rockers that we were, but there wasn't a plan. It just really kind of I went with the flow. But once working on Nightmare, and because it was long term, I mean, 3 years of working on a project, it's like, of course, I'm going to head that way.
Yeah, that becomes a huge part of your resume and skill set too. I'm wondering, there's like the certain theology of like, if you put out yourself into the universe, the universe kind of takes you in and directs you in the right way. Do you think that kind of played a part? Like, were you like putting out like, I want to be an animator, and everybody kind of knew that, or you wanted to get into animation and everybody knew that, so that when the right opportunity came up, they like thought of you?
I'm going to say yes, because I think, my side hustle was working with Spike and Mike. And so, and I'd say, come with me to these shows. So I'd bring people to the festival with me and say, look at these shorts. It's amazing. Look at this animation. We could do this. Let's try some of this, So I was definitely exposing people to animation as well. So they knew that I was this kind of an animation geek, I guess, at that time. So that's putting it out there that I wanted to do that. But in addition to the prop master work, I also wanted to do camera work. I was like, I'm going to be a director of photography. So on Nightmare, I actually snuck down to the stages a lot and would, put my head together with some of the camera guys and said, show me everything. I want to learn about cameras. So I was learning about cameras as well. And even though I ended up not doing that, but it was, that was one great thing about Nightmare, is very open.
Yeah.
Non-union in the sense of, people could touch other people's work. It wasn't like, no, you can't pick up that because you're not union or you're not part of the camera
Oh, really? Guild. So I'm not familiar with how unions work in the US. So say you're in camera and you want to, I don't know, get involved in props. Is that a no?
That's a big no-no.
Oh,
Yeah.
no. So like you can't do what you did back then now, kind of thing?
Oh, I couldn't. Yeah. If, there isn't the cross pollination, maybe secretly or on the side, but people aren't going to be openly sharing
Oh, that's
their
really
ideas.
sad.
I know.
Gosh. Because I feel like, I'm somebody who loves to go around and see what everybody's doing and like figure out how other people are doing things and kind of learn. But so when you're working on productions now, how like that, I almost feel like there's some kind of like collaboration lost, if in that sense.
Well, what happened for me as a production person, because at some point I'm like, well, I'm not going to be an animator and I'm not going to be camera. I'm going to be that production person that goes out onto the floor, onto the stages. And I do ask questions because it's part of me planning the schedule. So I got to be the person asking everyone, how many frames are you shooting a day? And what kind of technical difficulties are you having? How can we fix it? So I got to be, I ended up working on James and the Giant Peach on the next one. And I actually wrote that position for myself, which was assistant director. There wasn't even an assistant director on Nightmare. So I got to be AD on James, doing that very thing of really being in the know and asking a lot of questions. So that's a position where you really get to know a lot and know all the people and know what they're doing, because you have to find out how they're doing in their schedule.
Is that kind of why you've stuck with producing all throughout the years?
I think so. I love being that point of contact, and, having the information that makes it go forward is really a powerful position to be in, and well, how come this isn't moving? Well, that's because their motion control unit broke down. Well, let's move it here. Well, we can't move there because they need it on stage 5 in 2 days. You just have that knowledge of everything.
Sounds like your brain is like just a giant, like busy filing cabinet room with people running around with information.
I can see it right now.
Together.
Yeah.
Well, what has kept you fueled throughout the years? Because you're working on new productions a lot, and then kind of sticking through it. So for instance, like Nightmare, you were there for 3 years, then you worked on the next thing. You worked in television, live action, features, commercial. Like what is that thing at the end of the day that's saying keep going on this path? This is what I love.
Well, it's not just one thing, but I will say collaboration. That feeling that you're really in together with a core group of people. And if you can keep the crew down, which is what's so important in stop motion feature work, if we can keep it around 150 people, maybe even less, 130, it's just that unit and just keeping it through those years of that main group collaboration. But the feeling that I've always felt that we're making magic. And for me, why wouldn't I want to work on something that's magical? So that for me, it's really important that the story of what I'm working on is something I want to work on. I mean, I'm not gonna, I don't want to say what I wouldn't work on, but these are certain things that'll be like, this I'm gonna pass. It's not, it's not up to my story standards or something. But
are there aspects of the job that aren't the greatest to do, like that become kind of monotonous or whatnot after a while?
I don't know about monotonous. I prefer if we can do a lot of the work on stage in camera I don't like a lot of the artificial effects. I mean, to be honest,
I'm
I'm
with
not a
you
huge
here. It stands out
computer
so
graphic.
instantly when something's done on the computer versus in camera.
Oops. Yeah, no, that happens, really takes me out of the magic.
Yeah.
So for me, I love the in-camera work. Making really elaborate motion control units that move the camera constantly. I like like adding movement, but do it frame by frame and not, post movement. So that, yeah, there's the magic right there.
I'm just looking at, like, you've worked on, I don't know, dozens of productions, like
Mm.
an insane amount of productions every single year. Was there ever a time where you really kind of struggled to pursue this, or things didn't go so well for you? Because when I talk to, kind of, for instance, like animators, the contract ends and they might be out of work for 6 months, and
Mhm.
things might get hard. Does that happen with you as well?
Yeah, that definitely happened with me. And even before I started, the stint I had up in Los Angeles, I moved to Hollywood. Let's call it Hollyweird, and tried my hand at live action and was like completely soul sucked, and almost like, my soul was just like smeared onto Hollywood Boulevard, and I didn't think I was ever going to pick up from that. When you're working like 14, 15-hour days, and then you're this little lowly person that's like bringing the film to the lab, and you're thinking, I'm responsible for this entire project, and you're paying me like $10 an hour, not paying for my gas. I mean, just horrible, like really soul sucking moments. I thought, I can't do this. I can't do it. So I moved back to San Diego, and I worked at a tower video, and kind of just absorbed all the films at that point, looking at them, not actually working on them, and just took a break for a little bit. I did
Yeah.
take a break, but and in between some of these jobs, it might look good on paper, the years might be there, but there's often 6 months in between, or I
If
had
you
some
were to,
kids in there too.
yeah, oh yeah, of course. If you were
Kid
to kind
break.
of graph out your feelings of, like, happiness and sadness and excitement and non-excitement, how would it look? Like, it seems like you got into the industry pretty quickly, and then, like what you described, you got overwhelmed, I guess,
It'd
and
be
it was
like a
soul sucking.
tornado.
Yeah. And so
No,
how does that feel to, like, be in the thick of what you want to do, and this has been your career for the past.
25 plus, yeah, years.
Yeah. So how does it feel to be in the thick of it and then say, I don't, this is too much for me, and then stop? Like, did you know that you would get back into it, or, like, how do you?
Well, that was live action based. So
Yeah.
I didn't think, yeah, the part when I said I couldn't do it was more about live action.
Hmm.
Yeah. So stop motion and animation in general has been very paced out for me. So that's been great. There have been the breaks, like I said, but I always sort of knew with the connections I had, there was always going to be another project. And right now, animation, stop motion is so hot. It's
Yeah.
crazy how much is going on. The resources, it's like hard to find people, like to get a crew together in some places. And we're even going outside of the US and everywhere to just find some amazing crews. But so I feel like that's good energy for any animators out there. Just know that there's a project for you for sure.
That is great
Um,
news to hear.
yeah. Yeah.
Um, what you kind of said, you are relying on there's always going to be a project. That's something that I had a hard time coming to terms with, because I had a past career in the business world where, you can stay at a company for your entire career and then retire, type
Mm.
of thing. Like, you don't have to, like, you don't have to worry about what's happening in the next couple months. And so coming into animation, I know that, you kind of have to rely on the industry to have projects going forward. Does that ever bother you, or like, how do you plan for your future, knowing that, it's not, you can't plan for it, I guess.
Well, I think you need to be open about being a slightly nomadic. Back in my day, it was, you definitely were kind of jumping from Los Angeles to Northern California. There wasn't these set studios, and now there are more studios that are solid, like Leica up in Oregon, actually.
Yeah.
That's going to be there for a while. That's funded. They're set. They're going to be there. So you don't have that nomadic feeling of like, oh, I'm going to travel to the next job. Um, but it's a little bit, I mean, live action people are the same way. They're shooting in South Carolina. You're going to go to South Carolina for 3 months. oh gosh, we have some scenes in Texas, flying to Texas. So you just have to know, be a little prepared to maybe travel to the places that are filming. And
Is it when you,
COVID's changing all of
oh
that too.
yeah.
We might find states that or countries that have a different system for filming, and they're more open to allowing filming to go on.
That's for sure. Yeah. COVID is changing. It's interesting how animation is still thriving. Well, it makes sense. Is one of the
Mm-hmm.
entertainment industries that's really thriving in this time. I guess thinking back through all the productions you've been through, like what has been the biggest overall change in the industry that you've
Mm,
seen? Because you've worked on, things like Nightmare Before Christmas all the way up to producing a documentary this last year.
yeah. Um, I saw a very big change at the end of Nightmare, which was we were working with film, and at the end of Nightmare was switching to digital.
Mm,
So we were sort of, we were loading cameras every day and unloading cameras every day, and everyone's film was, 35 millimeter film. It was just so risky, um, it, but beautiful. I mean, the kind of lighting and moods and intensity you can get out of certain stocks of film is amazing. That people are striving for in digital still. But so I saw that happen. That was a bit um, unnerving at the time. We thought, oh gosh, what's going to change? Our jobs are changing,
yeah.
and for a while, like we got on. Well, James's Giant Peach was the next feature film, um, but to think that things were going to go so digital, and then that people may not want to see stop motion creatures or characters, is like, okay, they're just going to want to create them in the computer. That was huge. So we all kind of thought we were out of work after Nightmare.
What were you thinking you would have to do if you ended up out of work?
As a
Go back to
production
life.
person, I thought I could go back to live action,
Yeah.
but I ended up working on a TV show called Bump in the Night,
Yeah.
and
That's one of my favorite
so
shows as a kid. I
such
talked to
a,
Anthony Scott about that one.
oh, okay, good. Oh,
um,
Anthony.
yeah, what do you want to talk about kind of the biggest differences that exist in producing between like TV shows and feature films and commercials and all these? Like, what are the biggest challenges you're facing when you're working on a feature that's 3 years long or a TV show where you
Yeah.
need to pump out an episode every week? Maybe that's the
Well,
biggest challenge right
obviously,
there.
it's the time. Now you just said
Yeah.
it. It's like how you still obviously want quality, but you're sort of forced to really speed things up in the TV scenario or commercial work. So whether were you weighing the benefits on how is it going to look versus taking the time for a feature. Um, and even then, people set certain standards or formulas for what can work for a feature, and they always seem to go, or we want to make them go longer because it take more time to make them as beautiful as we can. But it's just about time. Speeding up, shooting in a different style, not on, we shoot on ones on features, we shoot on twos, even sometimes more for commercial work, just to speed it up.
Do you have like different people or crews you go for when you know you're going to work on a TV show versus a feature?
Yeah, you tend to have a different crew for
Yeah.
sure. That's gonna, well, first of all, the ones that are available to do feature work, that's long term, and some people do like the shorter work. They're not as committed as long, and they can just get in there and get out. And you've got people that like that style.
I know you talked about how, your connections got you into the animation world. I'm wondering because, your career spanned since the 90s. Have connections that you got at the beginning of the 90s, are they still paying? Like, are you still making new connections, or is it kind of you've met everybody and, connections from 5 years ago are paying off now or something like that? Like, how does that all work?
But the connections I made on Nightmare are still solid and holding true.
Oh,
People
wow.
like Anthony Scott.
Yeah.
I do the We Know Jack Show podcast with Todd Lookenland. He's a fellow crew member. Still staying in touch that way. And then people sort of are out there, and other jobs come around. They're like, "Oh, well, try Kat. She'll be able to help you out." So I still get references from people that worked with me on that. I'm like, and I may not have worked with them since, and they'll be like, "Well, I haven't worked with you since Nightmare. How do you know I'm any good?" But there was such a great sense of family on Nightmare that we all recommend each other.
Nice. Do you do specific, like if you meet somebody who, I don't know, is like a owner of a studio or another producer or something like that, do you do specific things to make sure you stand out in their mind or to make sure that you have a good connection with them? Or like, how do you establish the networking for yourself?
That is so specific of a question.
Oh
I'm trying to
no.
think, how do I, well, I have been told I'm not out there trying to be crazy and different, but I'm not your, I don't sort of hold myself as your average producer.
Yeah.
I'm not very uptight. I'm a little more casual in how I look and dress and tattoos and hair and all that. So for me, I think I stand out as more of this sort of this rogue producer, a little more independent, kind of feisty. I'm going to get in there and pull it together for you no
Gotcha.
matter what it takes.
So you're not
Um,
going up with a handshake and saying, "Hi, I'm Kat. Like, look out for me for your next project," type of deal.
Not at
You're
all.
just doing your thing.
Yeah, I have a different sort of, without a humor side to it all. It's got to be fun.
So what is a reason that somebody comes to you specifically and says, "I want Kat on this"? I mean, stop motion is probably a big influence in that decision for someone. But what do you think? What do you think that is?
Yeah, it's not easy. People have no idea what it takes to schedule these things, and I have my own formulas, and they change sometimes based on the quality of the characters or the, you just really, it's sort of experience with scenery, character count. How are we going to do lip sync? That's huge. You know, is it going to be
Yeah,
replacement heads, or so very specific questions that can help me kind of narrow it down for them and saying, this is how long it's going to take. This is how much it's going to cost. And they trust my numbers because I've done a few of those now, and they'll say, that's what they basically, it's trust. I mean, honestly, if I'm going to tell you what it's going to take to make it. However, they always come back and say, well, let's do it for half. And I'll say no, but that's definitely part of it, is just the knowledge of what it takes.
yeah,
And puppet films are tricky because there's hybrids. You can do, some people want to do a lot of backgrounds that are CG. Well, that changes it. It's not an all stop motion film then. So then I've got to work in CG vendors and people doing all the backgrounds, and let's do green screen. Well, okay, that changes this and that. So just knowledge of what it takes to make.
when people come to you with projects, do they have all that information figured out already? And they're like, "Here's the information," or it sounds like there's probably a lot of research involved on your end.
Yeah, sometimes I got to send them away and be like, you need to think this through. Many times people have thought, well, we're going to do a project and we just need one character of the hero. I'm like, never do you need one character, one puppet. Even in the shortest films, you need two or three of even a short, just because so they get used so much that you're going to damage them and they don't look good anymore.
Wait, so
And we
somebody's like,
want,
"We only need to make one pick."
yeah,
Oh my
yeah,
gosh,
they don't know.
no.
And so when I always do the multiples, and I go through and I have all the scenes, I'm like, and for shooting reasons, if you only had one, you have to shoot a linear line in line. But if you have multiples, you can be shooting several at the same
Yeah.
time. And I'll explain that to them. So there are times when I've just had to be like, and you can't be like, well, duh, you need more than one. I have to just explain to them, if you wanted to make it in 6 months to 8 months, we need 8 of your
Yeah.
heroes. And they're like, what? I can't believe it. And I was like, well, this is what we got to do.
Who is
Yeah,
when you're saying you're talking to this person, who is that person that you're talking to?
they're usually a producer or EP. It can be the director too. Usually both. They come together a lot of times and just say,
Gotcha.
I've got an idea. I have a script. Some of them have all the characters figured out. Some of them just have the main characters, but they don't always have the scenarios or the environment. So I have to break that down for them.
So
So different levels.
once you go with them with this big proposal, then it's kind of your job to meet all those expectations you set forth.
Generally, there's so much back and forth though, because I will put everything in, from security guards to yoga teachers to
What do you need a security guard for?
well, you never know. The vault, protecting the vault of the puppets you have. That's what I mean. I do
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
And then they come back and go, no, we need to do it for less. So I'll start peeling back and say, okay,
No donut Tuesdays.
we'll take out the yoga instructor. Sorry. No masseuse. And we
I
just
feel
go
like a
from there.
masseuse is required for any stop motion production because you get so stiff and like,
Yeah.
like,
So you have to.
have you had any big disasters on a project that have?
Oh, yeah, I mean, daily on some of them where mostly like puppet problems and
Yeah.
machinery
So what's the
breakage.
worst thing that can go wrong from your perspective?
Well, I mean, you're
Like you're
always
like,
trying to
oh crap, I do
recover.
not want to go back to the director with this issue. Like, what is that?
Well, I think sometimes it can be generated from the director themselves if they're in a position where they've all changed the story that moment, or they've decided something that's on the board to schedule the shoot that's been up there for weeks. They're like, I want to change the line, and you don't have that recorded, or that's pretty dramatic. So you work around it. You either do a scratch, you record to scratch, which means it's not the actor, it's you bring in a technician, or me. I've done some scratch I was James for a while. I did scratch on James when the kid the actor Paul Terry, who played James on James and Giant Peach, met me, he was so angry because I was female, and he was like, oh, he was so upset that a female had done his scratch voice. But I don't know. Anyway,
that's funny.
so I would say director changes can be very hard to incorporate into your life if they happen frequently. And sometimes even just the technical side of how we're going to make some of the puppets work. You try to be as simple as you can, but they get sort of complicated. I mean, there was a film I worked on. I won't mention it. Maybe I'll mention it later, the name of it. But we ended up doing very complicated breathing rigs inside the characters. And I thought, well, that's going to add so much time on the stage. And so I was pretty anti-breathing rig. And I thought, couldn't we just heave the chest a little to make the heavy breathing happen? But the mass of the character was so big that there wasn't any way to do that. And so that R&D, I mean, I could do the math for you, and so much time was spent on figuring out about these breathing rigs. And I'm not even sure in the end we didn't do the film. Does that hint to what the film is? But we ended up not making that film. And I just think of that R&D. I mean, that's what our research and development is to see if something's going to work. But you do spend a lot of time and money.
It seems I can guess what the film is based on it not getting made.
Right.
Do you think that R&D was 100% lost though, or were you able to bring that to a future production, or was somebody like, hey, we should do breathing rigs, and then you knew about it?
I'm the wrong person to ask, because I'll be like, never ever talk about breathing rig in the same room with me.
Okay.
No, just because it's that is what I would call over engineering, or just really complicating puppets.
So then how involved are you in kind of the artistic expression or the scripts, like all the level of what the film experience is for somebody watching it? Like, how involved are you in that? If you make decisions on
very happy to say that I have been fortunate, and I don't know if it's me putting my 2 cents in as much as I can because of some of the experience. But when I'm in these meetings talking about budget, I'm able to bring some of that knowledge of, well, if we try it this way, or we've done it this way, or the hard heads versus the mechanical heads versus the paddles. I have some of that knowledge, so I can say.
The paddle is just the mouth?
No, the paddle would be when you put actually like a placement, like a lip inside, a wire, but with a little paddle, and you just
you just go up and down. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I could bring that knowledge and say, well, why don't we do 10 characters that way that are medium to far away? We won't see them close. They're singing. well, things like that. So I have been very fortunate, and I hope to continue to be on my future projects involved in that creative side, because
Nice.
if in order to do a proper budget, you have to know how people are going to build things, because it would be a disservice to the budget to not say a certain portion is going to be built a certain way.
Gotcha. So what is that like must have thing for you to take on a project?
Must have.
Like, it sounds like you mentioned you love collaborating, you enjoy, like, being part of that process of the artistic direction in some aspect. Like, and you said before that you want to take on projects that you kind of believe in and want to do. So like,
Yeah.
what is that overall thing that you're like, yes, I want to take this on? Or did I just list it all?
Well, you did. No, it's got to be story.
Yeah.
Story, but boy, design is close. I mean, if it looks bad, I don't want to work on it.
So are you reading the script before anything?
Yeah, well, I have
Wow.
to, because the first thing I ever ask for is a script. And if they haven't done a character set breakdown, that's where I do it for them, page by page. You do it. It's really simple, archaic, list the page and say how every time you see a character, you do a tick mark, and then all of a sudden at the end you have, okay, he's in here 50 times out of an 80-page script. You're going to need a lot of them. So script is very, very important.
Are there certain stories that excite you that you really are passionate about working on?
Yeah, I think for me, and I think I've said this before, is not with you though, is animation for me, because it has that magical edge. I don't I want to see magical characters. I want to see Medusa, I want to see dinosaurs, I want to see characters that are meant to be in this form of magic, as opposed to an entirely all populated humanoid. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
I think stop motion works with really fun, because you can go so far out on a limb with aliens and all these great characters.
Well, and I think that's almost like where stop motion from the golden years of like Ray Harryhausen spanned from. It was special effects for all those fantastical things. So I'm just
O'Brien with King Kong.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just wondering, when I think of producer, like you mentioned, it sounds like you have to be insanely organized. You're on top of everything. But then, once you pitch that proposal, it gets approved. What does your job turn into after that on the production? Are you like running around from stages to get people stuff? Are you like involved in finances?
Yeah, well, if you ask any of my family or my children, they hate how organized I am.
They hate it. What?
Yeah, I just I have a label maker. Things are labeled. No, you have to be organized. It's the main thing, and just staying on top of that. But for me, it's following the money. You have just to be very careful where all the money's going, and that can change daily. So, a line producer, what I do. So here's the difference. There's producers that can work remotely and kind of check in. You do like weekly check-ins, and they're following the budget, but they're not dictating changes in the budget. As a line producer, it's very close to a production manager in that you're daily having choices made. Overtimes, I got to work extra. Do you approve it or do you not? So that all comes through line producers, people that need to work long. And sometimes it's not necessary. You'd be like, no, you don't really need those extra 2 hours. Go home, and just to be on it and know that they actually don't need to work more. Equipment failures, and power outages. Okay, that's happening. What do we do? Let the crew grow, bring in the power people. So you're there. You really need to be there as a line producer, and the production manager is a little more in on the working with the AD for scheduling and some of the tighter day-to-day stuff. But as a line producer, you're worried about the money, and people are coming to you about big money changes, story changes, editorial. So it's you're not walking the floor, though you can. And I would, I learned from Kathleen Gavin in Nightmare Before Christmas, that and I would just, because I'm a people person anyway, I'm not just going to sit in an office and do it from an office. You got to get out there and see what conditions they're working in. Maybe the shop department has no room for the large lumber they're working in. How can they paint this stuff if they don't have a spray booth that's safe? So you got to kind of get out there and know the ropes.
Thanks for going through that. I feel sorry
Yeah.
that I didn't ask you to give you highlights of your career beforehand, but we've mentioned James and the Giant Peach and Nightmare Before Christmas.
Yeah.
Do you want to kind of go through some of the highlights?
Well, sure. And then, so in between the features, I worked on A Bump in the Night, and then also really fun Kablam, a Nickelodeon show called Life with Loopy, with wonderful Stephen Holman and Josephine Wong were the co-directors on that, creators. And then I was fortunate to go to England to work on Corpse Bride. And I wasn't working with the main production filming, but I was working with McKinnon and Saunders, who, if you don't know, you should definitely look up. They're the major force in puppet building construction. They do everything. They've done the Bob the Builder, every European production, and in fact, even like Fantastic Mr. Fox, they worked on a lot of the puppets for that. Isle of Dogs. They just make a lot of puppets. So I got to work with them, and we created all the puppets, and then we sent them we were down in Manchester, and we sent them down to London. And then I worked as a vendor with Merrick Cheney on Coraline. So basically what that meant, we weren't in-house, we were creating the armatures for all the puppets and sending them to Oregon from California. And then what do you want? Do you want to know what I'm doing now?
Well, I wanted to ask you, because you also did Animation Outlaws, and of course I want to know what you're doing now. But I wanted to ask you, how do you know, like, you've created some of your own projects and you've worked on other projects. Like, do you have a feeling in your mind when you know something is going to be successful or sell or whatnot? Like, what is that thing that is gonna be well received, I guess, because you're at
That's interesting, yeah.
Start of projects.
Right. Well, I should have mentioned too that Mermaids on Mars was a fun 25-minute short, and then we did a Cheetos commercial after that, and that was through Athena Studios in Emeryville, across the bay here. And those just sort of came. One was commercial based, and Cheetos, So I think commercials, you don't always have like, I have to work on it, but that was fun because it was skeletons, and skeletons are awesome to work with, and we got to make these little creatures with them. Mermaids on Mars is just a great little story. So I forgot where I was going with that, just knowing if I wanted to work on it or just liking it. I can't remember what you said.
How do you know that a concept is going to be successful, like selling it wise? Like,
I don't think I don't usually go into it knowing. You just don't know. I don't think you know. I don't know. I mean, a lot of times you're basing it on, it could be the actors that you get, the project coming up. We have Daisy Ridley voicing a character, Stephen Fry. I mean, so for me, that has success kind of built in. If they do a good job, all we have to do is animate to that wonderful story. This story is amazing. Jim Capobianco's story, I guess I'm going to talk about, of Leonardo da Vinci, amazing, called The Inventor. This is a project I've been on since 2014. And I've done
this is what you're currently working on now.
Yeah, I've done every budget, from like shooting on an island that doesn't even exist yet, to Canada, to Mexico and Europe and US, and half and half.
Wait, shooting on an island that doesn't exist?
Well, I'm just making that up because it's so random, of all these places we're trying to figure out where we could
How do you know how to put together a budget in like Mexico versus Canada versus the USA? Like, what?
You kind of wing it in a sense. You get a handle, you find a contact in that particular area, and you say, please give me some consulting. If you can get it for free, you try that, or you give them a little something and you consult with them, and you get rates, and then it's a formula in that sense, but you just plug in going rates. The main
Gotcha.
thing that gets everybody is what we call fringes, which here in the US is quite large. It's everywhere, but it would be things like workers' comp, pension, healthcare. It goes on top of that rate.
Oh,
So all of
wow.
a sudden you're paying someone $1,000 a week. Well, 50% more of that is all the fringes. So a budget isn't just 1,000 a week. You got to add all that. So
Gosh.
different countries, that's really different. And of
Yeah.
course, different countries have tax breaks that help us.
Like Canada. So
Yeah.
you should do more in Canada. Is this your baby then? Like this is out of your mind?
Yeah, well, it's my budget I've been working on so hard. And then now we've got a wonderful co-group out of France,
Nice.
Folioscope, that has been really working hard on getting the budget going. They're currently shooting a stop motion feature right now. So the fact that we could roll right in would be perfect.
So what does
Yeah.
that mean? You have the concept together, you have some celebrities that have said yes, and
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know if they've done their recordings already, but you're putting together a budget to hope to sell it to a studio who's going to take it on, or
Yeah.
investors. Like what does that
Well,
mean?
because it's not been sort of grabbed yet by a studio, like the big ones always mentioned,
Mhm.
we are trying to do more of a European style, which would be smaller, maybe even European distribution places would take certain percentages. So instead of one big company giving us money, we might get money from 4 different places. So that's kind of where we're at. And we're also going to launch a Kickstarter in the next day or two. So
Oh,
more information about that.
why would a studio give you money? Is that like a deal where they're saying, we'll help fund this, but we get a percentage of the rights when
Yes.
it airs?
Not the right. It's yes. So they'll get percentage of the sales. So they'll get
Sales.
percentage of how
Right.
well it does. Yeah.
So then are you involved in that as well, or is that a
Oh,
different?
we have another producer, Robert
Gotcha.
Ripberger, is heavy into the sales part of it. So they have to do a lot of
This is so
prediction.
complex. Gosh.
Yeah, there's a lot of prediction. So he goes out and he exposes that script. And the scary thing about that is so many people are going to start seeing it that it could be stolen.
Oh,
So you
fair.
don't want, you sign NDAs and you don't want so many people knowing about it. But they do predictions of like, how this is how well it's going to do. It's going to do great in Italy, right? Because it's Leonardo. And so we have all these predictions of how well it's going to be done.
So I'm trying to figure this out in my head. Say, for example, he goes to Amazon Prime and is like, "Hey, we're developing this thing. We have the concept. We're almost production. Would you be interested?" And then Amazon Prime would say, "Yes, maybe." And then that helps you get a studio interested in it because you have a contact at.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, that's a simple. If they said they're interested, that'd be great. And Jim Capobianco has gone to a few places and they got saturated with
Yeah.
content. Yeah, they're like, we don't another animation thing, not right now, not right now. It's
Well,
like, well,
I'm assuming you're not the only group of people doing this. There's probably, I don't know,
yeah.
countless other productions trying to be made at the same time. So what is
Mm-hmm.
that thing that ends up being the check mark that puts everything into place?
Well, you mean a studio giving money or
Or is
us
that just
launching?
it? A studio's like, yes, we'll give you the money, let's start,
Yeah,
and then
it
everything.
could be as simple as, I mean, because this story is so unique and great. And Jim Capobianco won an Oscar for Ratatouille. I mean, the guy has clout.
Yeah.
Um, I really am confused as why someone hasn't picked it up. But in some way, we're kind of fortunate that we could keep it really independent and we won't have a big person changing the story.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be changed. He's done a great job. So yeah, what does it take? It could just be as simple as one place seeing it and giving us that big check. But I think with the Kickstarter launch, basically is paying for the animatic. We just want to pay the editor to finish the animatic.
I was just going to
Jim,
ask you that. Yeah.
yeah, it's not a huge request. I mean, I don't think for a Kickstarter amount. And then we actually have some wonderful animator gifts in there, which it's like, well, you could actually be a character in the film, maybe, or you could we have got some animation master classes
Oh, nice.
where we're going to pull in some of the animators animators that have worked on Isle of Dogs and other films that would do a little master class that
Oh,
animators can be
wow.
involved in. So,
That your connections are paying off like crazy right now.
yeah, yeah.
That's awesome. No, this is fantastic. I hope everything comes together very soon, because it'd be awesome to
Thank
see,
you.
kind of follow the production of this.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about the We Know Jack show. Do you want to
Oh,
talk about
thank
why
you.
you started
Thank
that?
you.
Because you also, there you go. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can see that she's wearing the We Know
We
Jack
only
show
have 10 of these, but I'll make
t-shirt.
more. And then if people listen and we find out, maybe I'll send shirts. So I shouldn't say that because I don't have to send shirts everywhere.
You heard it here
Um,
first. She's sending
no,
shirts to you if you
no,
listen to it.
no.
Well, you started this podcast very recently, actually, in the past like couple of years. So
Yeah.
why did you decide to start it now after all this time passed?
Oh gosh, it really came together quite quickly because we had a 25-year reunion 2 years ago, and the crew was filmed here in San Francisco. So a lot of the crews maintained their location here, and we all met at actually it was at the ranch, Skywalker Ranch. So that was a great reunion, and then we had actually two in a short period of time, and Todd Lookinland, my co-host, we were just sort of talking at different parts of the room, and people were telling these amazing stories that no one had ever heard of before. We're like, hang on, I worked on that film and I did not know that. Or, basically that was it. So Todd's like, well, why don't we just pull together some of these stories? And that's kind of how it started. And it's really gone. I mean, we're getting some amazing stories out of people. So, and hopefully things that haven't been told, not
Yeah.
rehashed. And we're talking to people that normally don't do interviews or talk to people. So it's kind of like, well, Randy Dutra, who helped figure out the jackhead sculpts, is like, listen to what he has to say. You're not going to hear this anywhere else.
Yeah.
Animation talks are great with Anthony Scott, Tim Hiddle. We'd love to get someone like Trey Thomas on there. We got Angie Glocka, one of the only female animators on there, Owen Clate. Just really great stories because it comes down to basically none of us knew we were working on such a iconic film, and we just were trying to get through those frames every day. Stephen Buckley's is really funny. I don't think his is released yet. His is really hilarious. He just talks about the sweat and the anguish and the pain of waiting to see film, right? Because it's just not
Yeah.
digital. You couldn't watch it that moment. You had to wait the whole next day, and you're just like not sleeping and waiting for your film to be seen.
Yeah, I
So
think I think Anthony Scott was talking about that, how everybody would gather around and be really excited on how it turned out, and you don't really have that anymore because you can just watch it right away.
there was a whole moment. The screening room in the morning, dailies we called them, was like a make or break moment. I mean, Henry was buying the shots in that room.
Oh,
He
really?
bought he'd be like, there's a take. I was actually the one in the morning who'd go through and like, right, it's a take, a test, and pop through or whatever. So takes were listed first. Dead quiet when those takes came on. They were on a loop, so he'd only see them like 3 times. Well, before we figured out the loops, we finally had to set a limit because it would just keep going. You'd splice the film together, and that take would just go, and it could be looked at a million times. So finally, someone, I don't know who, maybe Pete Kazachek, said we needed to limit the amount people see it, like it 3 times, because you're not going to see it on the screen, but just that moment, right? But yeah, he would sit there, and Henry would just sit there, and everyone's like not breathing when the takes come up, and then he'd either go, "Oh, that's great," when drag his hands through his hair, "That's good," or it might be quiet, you wouldn't hear anything, and everyone's like, "No, he didn't like it, he didn't buy it." So,
Then you had to redo that shot, I guess.
yeah, we didn't have too many redos, to be honest, but it was that moment of like, maybe he wasn't 100% happy with it,
Nice.
but when
Well,
he was, everyone knew.
that sounds like a very iconic kind of experience.
Well, right. So why not have a podcast to tell those
Yeah.
moments,
Oh, that's
So
great. Yeah. Well, and I think if anybody's in stop motion listening to this, they should definitely check it out, because you're probably just going to learn anecdotes that can even help you out in what you're doing from hearing their experience.
Sure. I mean, I think maybe even trying to film without the crutch of viewing it so many times yourself. Like,
Oh,
I don't know. I think that's actually a hindrance or a handicap, maybe. I
oh,
don't
for
know.
sure. Sometimes it for me, I've noticed that if I view something too many times, I lose that original reaction I have, and then it almost seems acceptable, even if I know that things are bad. Because your brain gets used to it, and you're
You
like, this
get
is
used to it,
fine.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's like hard to have that
Yeah, there should be just
dig
like the
down in that
loops.
feeling of the initial reaction.
The way we limited the amount of time seeing it, because if you think for feature work anyway, it's just up on that screen for that moment.
Yeah.
No one's dwelling on it. But the thing that was crazy is Henry, in those only 3 times, to be like, his finger needed to move 3 more frames to the left. I mean, he's prolific. I mean, he's an amazing director for
Oh
animation.
wow, gosh. Is there any? I'm just thinking back on our kind of chat as we wrap up. Is there any overall advice that you wish you had received throughout your whole career? Now looking back.
Advice. Let me think. Well, kind of hearkening back to what I said about projects will come along. I mean, if you're putting the energy into it and you're creating work, or you've done some work, you're going to make those connections. One job will do it. One job will do
Good
it,
job.
because you're going to meet the production manager, and that production manager will hire you. If you're good and you're not a pain in the butt, not complaining about things, you will get hired again.
Yeah.
For your work, because you're doing it and you're producing frames. And so work will come. And at least down in the States here, we used to be able to go on unemployment. So many people would go on unemployment on those 6-month stints in between. I don't know what it's like up there. And I don't even know
we
in
have that too. Yeah.
COVID times, don't be ashamed to do that. There was often, you'd see half the crew at unemployment line. Oh, hey, what's up? Because everyone gets all, ends a job around the same time. But
I meant to ask this at the beginning, but maybe I'll ask it now. Maybe it ties into what you just said, but what is the kind of the overall feeling that you hope somebody gets from listening to your journey and experience and all the things you've worked on over the years?
I would say just trying, even though I had mentioned earlier about not being able to try different levels or different positions, just be aware of them and know what that other person is going through. So not to be focused, tunnel vision, to collaborate and work with other people. You got to know how hard it is for that other person too. As an AD, I really learned that on Peach, going through and talking to people and seeing how hard it was for some of them, or some of them are crawling up under the set and going up underneath and having to open a trap door and animate through a trap door and get down again. I'm like, that's good. That's physically wear and tear on you. So I understand, and like listen and not be like, not just to walk in and be like, you should have been done already. That doesn't help. So knowing other people's positions, I guess, would be a kind of a takeaway, just to question and ask questions.
I think that's really valuable and important, and it makes you a more. I bet people want to work with you more because they know that you're taking the time to understand them at their level of what they're doing too.
I think so. I get that feeling from crews I've worked with, that they'd be like, "Oh, you were, one of the nicer ones we've worked with," or you listen to me.
Good to
I'm
hear.
like, cool.
One of the nicer ones.
You bought beer for us on Friday. I'm like, yeah. So beer Friday.
In the budget.
Yeah. See, I told you, I keep everything's in there.
You have like a beer fund. I love that.
It might be called entertainment or something. So.
Is there anything else that you wanted to share in our chat?
I forgot another little project that could. Well, that's one thing too. As a line producer, I there's often a lot of little things I have my fingers in until we actually get a green light. I should be having other things going on, but one's called If Crickets or Crickets Would Sing, and it's will be a short, and that's another little project I'm working on up here in the Bay Area, and I hope it gets off its feet. But would be privately funded.
Nice.
Pretty intense topic about the Holocaust, so that would be interesting. If that gets
Is it
through.
stop motion too?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah, stop motion, and we call him Mauchi, the director. He's very technically savvy, so he's trying to use a lot of modern skill set with maybe even like motion capture facial stuff, which I haven't done with Puppet. So the Puppet body, but a motion capture face.
Yeah, I've seen some
Maybe I shouldn't
examples of that.
say that, but anyway, he's going to be working on that. And so COVID stalled that whole project. We were going to start shooting in April.
Gotcha.
But I believe that's still being worked on. Merrick Cheney's doing some of the armature work. But I think just generally, the Animation Outlaws thing is still going. Please check it out if you can. It's available Amazon.com. Oh, here's something interesting. An animator that lives over your way, Juliana Cox, and Peyton Curtis, they own a theater called The Gorge or Gorge. Do you know it?
No.
It's probably north of you somewhere. It's not in Toronto proper.
Okay.
They're going to screen it. They're going to screen Animation Outlaws.
Oh, no way. That's awesome.
Yeah, they're trying to figure out their live audience situation. So it probably wouldn't be until they can actually get people in the theater, which could be a month or something out. I don't know if you guys are doing theater.
Theaters have just opened up, but you have to like book your seats online. And I've also heard it's like $2 because they're just trying to get people in.
Yeah.
So
The Gorge, I'll let we'll know. I'll put that on my animationoutlaws.com website when we get in there. But I'm also part of like San Francisco Indie Fest is doing a virtual festival. It's going to be in that in September. You can see the trailer on the website. It's kind of fun. We've got a lot of big names in the industry in my doc. That Spike Mike helped with their short films like Nick Park, and you saw it.
Yeah, no, it was really cool seeing it's like a little piece of history that I hadn't really heard of. I'd heard of Spike and Mike anecdotally, but to know how influential it was and to see all that firsthand and they are sharing their stories on the documentary too, and you've got all that fun footage of how crazy the festival actually was. It was really neat to see all that.
Thanks. Well, and I think they had made it up to Vancouver, but not your way, not out to the east side. Very US based film festival. But and then what else? Oh yeah, I'm got work at Stupid Buddies Studios right now as well.
Yeah, congratulations.
So, thank you.
You're doing so much. I don't know how. Well, organization's your thing, I guess.
Yeah, that's how. Just I have different binders.
All right.
Keep everything in binders, and then when that person calls, you're like, oh, let me grab that binder.
Did you grab your podcast interview binder when we?
No, but it is on a piece of paper.
Oh, there we go. All right.
So this has been so fun. Thank you, Terry.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for coming on. It was an absolute pleasure to have you on the second time, and I enjoyed learning all about how you made your career thing too. So thanks.
Good. I hope we helped somebody out, and they might be inspired and hang in there. Stop motion is hot right now, so we'll be needing animators at some point. So I hope to hear from some of you. Who knows?
There we go.
If I talk to you, tell me you listened to this podcast, and then I'll know where you heard about it.
100%. Yeah. So if you're listening, tell Kat you heard it in this episode, and also make sure that you check out all those wonderful things that she shared. Animation Outlaws, her We Know Jack show on iTunes, and the Inventor Kickstarter. And I'll include all those links in the description of this podcast. So please check them out and help support Kat's projects. And that's all for now. So thanks so much for listening. Okay, bye.